Welcome to the Two Chumps Football Podcast. He's Amo Calamino. I'm Chad Wilson. You know what the deal is. We talk about football here on this show, and we do it well. Plus, we give you hellified picks. That's why we know a whole lot of you are here. But as I said, that's Amo Calamino. He's been desperately awaiting to see if his name would show up on the Epstein list. Amo, how you doing? You on there or what? No?
I'm safe. Mark me safe. Mark me
Yeah,
safe.
good. And I'm
You know what I want to know, and I think most Americans want to know, how this guy suicided himself, how his girlfriend got arrested, and it took us, what, 4 years or something like that to find this list?
It's America. Shut up about it. That's the way that it goes. I'm here strictly to let a naysayer know today. So that's what my job for the entire day as we run through these college football topics. Emil, was that not one of the best set? Listen, there have been 3 great funny moments on ESPN outside of them trying to be a serious sports organization that makes me laugh just on the side. But where does that rank between, I forget the Asian comedian's name who came on there and said, Chang, you complete me, ho. That's her last name. That's her last name, ESPN. How dare you? That was hilarious to me.
That was good.
There was also another segment where the guys were talking about their haircuts, Tim Tebow and the other guy, I forget his name, and Paul Feinbaum happened to be on the set. And they were talking about what they tell the barber when they go in. And then I think it was Tim Tebow, Mr. Very humble, spiritual Tim Tebow threw out a barb that said, "What do you tell them, Paul?" That was hilarious.
That was good. But
And
this one might have
had,
been the best, and I'll tell you why.
Which one's the best?
I think this one, I'll tell you why. Because you could say, oh, well, Reese Davis, isn't black and didn't get it, but I got it. I mean, my point is, it was kind of like I'm listening to him and I'm thinking, you don't really think that this kid used naysayers.
Well, listen, I haven't really dug into that part. I'm gonna have to look into it now, and I have to apologize for not looking into it. That may be, in fact, what the shirt is standing for, playing on what the original saying is.
It could be a double,
Which in that case is kind of genius. I find it hard to believe that Jalen Milroe, a quarterback, a leader of, let's still call it the premier college football program, would go around trumpeting that. So it's a play on words, pretty genius if it is.
But I mean, let's be honest. Everybody else knew
what the original saying,
what it was intended to mean.
I've got to be honest with you. As I was listening to it, knowing that something had happened there, as Reese started to go through what it said and started with the end, I leaned forward in the seat, which is what I think Pat McAfee and everyone else on that booth did. And Joey said it himself. I thought it was about to go down here on this show. Absolutely hilarious.
To me, what made it funny too was Davis. If he got it, like if you had me reading,
it didn't look like he did, Emil.
No, if you had me reading that, there'd be a smirk on my face, like my ears would be up to here. So he didn't get it. So he was like the kid that
he didn't understand what these guys were almost about to die over. I'm sure by now someone has filled him in. I can't help but sit there and think, like, what if that was, the copy that Dez or Joey had to read? Because those guys probably don't read everything beforehand.
No.
It pops up on, and if they got caught, that might have been a scene.
Oh, yeah, that might have been. I'll tell you what, we're going to have to do a whole offseason show on ESPN because I think I could do a stand-up comedy routine on that network as far as what that network's about right now.
They are an SNL skit quite a bit as they go and do these studio shows and everything else they try to do that's not live television broadcast of games. They don't do it very well, at least not for us sports fans. Maybe there's a group out there that really, really likes it. Last thing on that, man, Pat McAfee has been a very good addition to that. I mean,
he's
have the stone.
He's funny, and he's a smart guy, and
he keeps them on their toes.
Yeah, he doesn't stay on script. I like him. I find him refreshing for that. But he'll be off that network at some point just because at somewhere,
He'll run
defend them.
afoul of
Yeah,
the
he'll
rigid
defend them at
rules.
some
He'll
point.
offend
So
someone at some point
yeah.
if he hasn't already. All right, college football playoff committee. Emil, can we say was vindicated January 1st with these two games? Were they vindicated? Because we all know, let's stop playing games here. Fans are fans. You Florida State fans, your egos are bruised. I get it. I understand that. Yes, you have valid arguments on merit. But I think we can't be all stupid. When we take off our fan hat, we know what this is about, and it's entertainment. It's a television program, and it seems they did the best that they could for the college.
Yeah, without Jordan Travis, let's put Florida State in that game with Michigan. Without Jordan Travis, the problem for them would have been, could they have maybe held Michigan to 24 points or so? Because Florida State's got a pretty salty defense, perhaps, but I don't know if they can move the ball.
24-7, 24-6.
Yeah.
It's definitely not the game that we got that was decided on the final play in overtime. So, college football playoff committee was probably drinking champagne, toasting, and looking at everyone
the
like,
real question becomes what would have been interesting though is, and I know,
what if Georgia got in there?
yeah, I know it's obvious to
We
say,
already saw
well,
that game though, right? We've seen Georgia versus Michigan, and Georgia won the game, but just in terms of a matchup, Alabama versus Michigan, I think they're number 1 and number 2 all time in wins. Am I correct? Those two programs.
Michigan is total wins. It's like them, Ohio State, and Alabama are all close because they played the longest too. Besides,
I thought I heard
they
that
played
as
the
they were
longest.
coming out of the tunnels, that Michigan's number 1 all time, Alabama
Yeah.
number 2 all time. You're playing in a Rose Bowl. A good game, Emil. I wish Jalen Milroe could have done a little bit more as a quarterback. I thought it'd have been nice if he was a little further along in his development. Probably would have meant an Alabama win, but it was what it was, and as such, had a great game. I think his limited abilities kind of made the last play what it was.
Well, let's be honest. My brother told me this. He's a diehard Michigan fan since we're kids. I didn't know Harbaugh's son is the special teams coach.
Well, that was an issue.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure how. I mean, you can't do this. I understand that, but I mean, hell, if their special teams just played decent, I'm not sure how close that game is. I mean, they sacked Milrose out of the gate twice on the first possession. Then they fumble a punt and let Alabama, basically short field 7-0. They miss a relatively short field goal. They botch an extra point by rolling the snap back there. I mean,
you and I both know that you can't really do that because.
No, I know, but I'm saying special teams cost them 7 to 11 points, depending how you look at it.
They did. It's crazy, and I'm sure Jim has strung up his kid. I don't imagine that he'll be light on his kid about that and probably smacked him in the back of the head and said, you got to get your act together. I've seen a lot of videos and tweets out there about the final play. And if you can remember, they sent the running back out to the wide side of the field, and he was available for a pass, which seemingly the defenders blocked up over there. So a pass out to that running back caught. He may have had to run through an arm tackle and got into the end zone. But I'm here to tell you, Emil, in that position, as someone who's called plays both on the offensive and defensive side, in that moment, you really want to do what your quarterback is best at. And there was a really big chance, based on some of the things you've seen, not only in this game, but earlier on throughout the year, is that there's a really good chance that Milroe in that situation could have one-hopped that throw, thrown it over the guy's head, thrown it to the back shoulder to where he couldn't get a good run. Those things could have happened, and you want your quarterback to be
I think, and I'd have to have someone like you with more knowledge of schematics watch it than me, but you'd have to watch a 22 film. I'm guessing what they were trying to catch Michigan in was a pressure, figuring Michigan thinks they're going to throw the ball from the 3-yard line. And then just catch somebody in a gap and, you seal it and away you go. I have to think Alabama missed a block somewhere because the play wasn't even close.
I will tell you from a schematic standpoint, that play was not there. It was not there. By the time you had lined up, the way Michigan lined up on that line of scrimmage, that play was not there. They'd really covered all of the interior linemen for Alabama, and the play does require an uncovered lineman to pull and go make a block across the formation. And that, if you covered the center and 2 guards, now it's a tackle. that's got to get all the way across. And
Yeah.
they were solid up the middle. They were solid off the edges, like they knew that this was a play that had worked throughout the game, and Alabama would go with their bread and butter. Nick Saban did say they called 3 different plays. Remember, there were timeouts.
And this is why I think as good as he played the second half of the year, you got to give the kid credit. He had them in that game. I think they were limited with him because it requires a quarterback to get out of the play.
Exactly.
It requires a quarterback to see the formation, say what we have called isn't there. I got to get out of that play.
Or at the very least, you call 2 plays in that, on your timeout, and it's 2 very opposite plays. If they stack the line of scrimmage, we're going to go do a little jump toss or a rollout and a quick throw to a tight end. Or if they're a little light in there, we go ahead with that original play, which is running up in there. So I would have liked to have seen something like that, but I understand why we didn't. It's because, you've got a guy that's a new starter and he's still developing and he just wasn't ready to do it.
Was the kid who made the catch against Auburn available, or did he get hurt?
I'm not sure. It was a little too close for him to pull those heroics off again.
No, but you don't mind trying to get them in a formation where he's singled up wide, where you bunch it inside, try to get him singled up, and maybe let him go get the ball.
I think anything requiring some kind of a precision throw, which is what a back shoulder or fade was off the table for them. It's just not the best thing that he does. I would have preferred a slant.
We're talking about the last play with Alabama, but what I took away from that game was I came away, believe it or not, more impressed with Michigan because they didn't play their best game.
Mm-hmm.
They played an all-time great coach. And, say what we want about Harbaugh. Harbaugh is a really, really good football coach. He did it in the NFL.
Won everywhere.
Yes, he won
University
everywhere.
of San Diego, Stanford, NFL here. He's done it all over.
Yeah, so he's facing a guy that is his match, if not better, at the college game.
Right.
And his team didn't play their best game. I hit the special teams aspect of this. And they needed a championship drive to send that game to overtime at the end with 4 minutes left.
I wasn't entirely sure that they'd be able to do, but they did it.
And they did it. And knowing that says something to me. It says something about the character of his football team that, their backs were against the wall against a team that defensively in college football these days is as good as you're going to get.
Right.
And they did it. So
I think Michigan built some calluses up over this season. Being attacked the way that they were, right, whether you think it was right or wrong by the NCAA and the Big Ten and the other teams in the Big Ten, they built up some calluses. There's some unity, right?
Yeah.
That was brought up, especially with the final games of the season where Jim wasn't there. I think they bonded together some. And part of why I picked Alabama in this game is I felt like there would be some distractions throughout the bowl prep with having to answer those questions about, the sign stealing and everything that went on. And to a certain degree, Emil, I feel like that might have been the case because look at what happened with the special teams. And as you said, they didn't play their best game. So some of that might have been at play, but it wasn't enough to throw off this team, which really says something.
No, it does. And, like you said, all in all, Georgia didn't earn their way in there because they lost that game to Alabama. So I think we have to look at this and say, I guess, based on the quality of the games, they probably got it right. They really based on what we had at the end of that season, I feel like they got it right. The second game was nothing to sneeze at either.
Oh no, it came down to the end as well. I will say this though, Emil, that if they were going to continue with a 4-team playoff beyond this year, and we weren't moving to 12 next year or anytime soon, then I would have felt they really wronged Florida State. You would have set a bad precedent by keeping an undefeated conference champ out. If you continue,
now you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about it moving.
We don't, and neither do they, as a matter of fact.
Well, and it's needed because I think what we can all say, and we'll recap a little bit when we do our picks. But with the bowl season, you saw just how uninteresting most of these games were, and I think the NCAA and everybody involved in the sport has to look and say, well, with a 12-team playoff, at least we get 4-4-2-1. We get 11 games that mean something because as it stands right now, we're at 3, and that's not enough. I'll tell you right now, and you know how much of a diehard USC fan I am. I was at my friend's coaches varsity basketball. I was at a tournament, a
Mhm.
holiday tournament that night. I caught the last quarter and a half of USC. I watched two and a half quarters of the Penn State Mississippi game, one of the better games on paper, and these games. So you're talking a guy, and you know me a long time. What was there, 43 bowl games? I legitimately watched about the 3 bowl games in total if you had the time up.
Yeah, I think I've talked about this on this show, what January 1st used to be for me. It was
Yeah.
a tradition. I baked that full sheet of Pillsbury cookies, and I sat there and watched games from 11 a.m., which was the Outback Bowl, all the way through the night. And, we had all those really big games in one day. But not only that, I would watch some of the other ones leading up there, even the games with the MAC teams in there. But that's just not what we have anymore. But this is a good segue into what happened in the Orange Bowl right down the street here from me, as Florida State had so many guys out and they ended up getting completely trounced by Georgia. I do like the comments made by Kirby Smart after the game. Now, he was the one who issued the ass whipping, but he had some comments about, as fans, you really got to think, and the NCAA as a whole, you really got to think about what it is we want to do here with college football. Is that what you guys wanted to see? And he feels like we're going to get more and more of that going.
Well, I mean, Florida State had, I think, 15 or
I think it was
12.
18 and 19.
Well,
They
like
ended up
21
having
in
lost a
total.
few.
So when you added the kids sitting out for the draft plus the portal, you had about 20 to 21 kids, I think it was. And I said to you, it's almost like, I don't know if it was intentional, but it was almost, if it was, it would have been great. It was almost like F you to the NCAA. We're going to play 18-year-old freshmen. You're going to get this piece of trash on TV. And by the way, write us a check for $17 million.
Yeah, there's no way that was intentional. You don't do that as a program. You can't. It makes recruiting very difficult. But that is essentially what ended up happening, intentional or not intentional. I think though this could end up being a good thing for Florida State. You got some young guys in there to play against, arguably the best program at the moment in college football. So it doesn't, it gets easier from here in terms of those guys when they face another opponent. It gives you something to be pissed off about going into next season. And Mike Norvell had a very good speech afterwards as well. Florida State has come up over the last 2 seasons, but you're not quite there yet. You're not in the Georgia, Alabama world when you have that many defections in a bowl game that's not in the college football playoff. Georgia managed to keep guys around. Alabama has managed to keep guys around in the past when they've come across a game that was not for everything. And one thing I did hear Nick Saban say today on the Pat McAfee show, that last year, I want to say it was the last bowl game, or the last bowl game they had last season, they beefed up insurance for the guys who were draft eligible. I mean, these are things you do, man, to head
Yeah,
off
I mean,
a
you got,
potential problem.
at some point we all, they have to, everybody's got to start thinking this stuff through better. I mean, I've made jokes. I sent you something today. I saw the top running back at Mississippi's in the portal. Why? They just went 11-2.
Emil, we've come to this point now where there's only maybe 4 or 5 teams in college football that are really vying for that championship, team wise. That's the culture. The rest of these guys are out for the money, man. And the reason is we've put it out there. And I'm not here to, I support these players getting money. I don't support the system that we have in place now. I don't support the NCAA throwing their hands up and just letting it go run amok because maybe they're low key pissed off about the fact that they lost on that front. You're gonna let a really good game go to hell, for lack of a better term,
Getting
by being
close.
pissy. By
It's
being
getting
pissy.
close. The dean of your coaches has called it, has used my term, minor league football.
That's not what we want. We see how the USFL and XFL and every other spring league has not been able to hang on. And I'm not saying that's going to happen to college football, but things get less popular. Remember how important boxing was to us in our
Listen,
American culture?
I've said this a lot, and every sport has to be wary of this, including the NFL. It comes at you fast. If you ask somebody in the 1950s who's running boxing or Major League Baseball, they would have scoffed at the idea. Major League Baseball was the king of the hill, and boxing was right there with it. and right behind boxing was probably horse racing. Okay.
Sure. And that's deady dead. College
That's dead. That's
basketball.
rich people buy horses and watch them run. Okay. Boxing is I don't want to call it dead, but it isn't what it was in the 50s. Major League Baseball is the number 2 sport revenue-wise, but it isn't the NFL, nowhere close. So things change. College football is to remember, they've got a hold on these little towns. I call them little, relatively speaking. Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Lincoln, Nebraska, Columbus, Ohio, these places. In the cities, their games, you go to New York City on a Saturday night, there'll be people watching it, but it's a pro sports town. I mean, that's what it is.
Well, I happen to have been there in those times,
Yeah.
and no one's paying attention to the
No,
Georgia Alabama
when you pick up the New York Post, arguably the greatest sports section, if you still like to hold a paper, and you can read it online, the Post sports section doesn't really cover anything on college other than gambling on it. They don't have a section for Syracuse.
Listen, the day after Georgia Alabama, they will have on the back page something that went on with the Knicks in their game against Toronto.
Yeah,
and that's just the way that it is. And
so what I'm trying to get at is, we talk about this a lot with Miami and Los Angeles. Unless those schools are really good, it's not a big deal.
no,
I mean, people
which
want
is hard for someone in East Lansing or Ann Arbor or Columbus or Tuscaloosa or Baton Rouge to really understand, because it's so important to them. But that's just kind of the way that it is. Speaking of the Northeast, your Philadelphia Eagles, what is going on there? I think the point really got driven home last week when they lost to the Cardinals. Is like, are they going to?
I don't think they. You're asking what's going on. I think you and I talk about this, and part of it is I'm a numbers guy, and to a degree, even though you bust yourself with math, you are too.
Only when I'm with you, because you're just so much better.
Nah, you've read Freakonomics on your own. Don't try to. I know how you think. Okay, so I always say, if you're a baseball fan, the team's going to play X number of 1-run games in a year.
Sure.
A good team is going to win 55 to 60% of them. So if your team plays 20 games in the first half of the season, I don't care if they're the Dodgers, the Braves, the Yankees, if they're 16-4 in 1-run games, you best believe the second half of the season, most likely, it's going to flip.
Yeah, well, it's a part of my handicapping strategy.
Yes, you're going to end up 55 to 60%. I've been saying to you all year, I understand it's the NFL. You're not going to blow everyone out. But the Eagles, going into that Cardinal game, were 8-2 in 1-score games. Now, if you said they were 6-4, I'd say, okay, they're a good team. That makes sense. The second half of the season just started to go the other way. And the Eagles were never a dominant team this year. Everybody remembered the Super Bowl team last year. The Eagles have played 11 1-score games. Let me give you context. The 49ers, they're 1-2 in 1-score games. The Cowboys, they're 3-2. So those two teams combined have played 8 1-score games. The Eagles have played 11.
Yeah, and certainly something for fans out there to think about. I know, Emil, you pay attention to this stuff, so it seems as though, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the Eagles are almost a shoo-in for that number 5 spot. Is that basically it?
Listen, you're not going to trap me. Okay. I'm old enough to have been there the year the Cowboys went 1-15. I was in my apartment in college with my buddies on Sunday Night Football. Our only win of the year was against a playoff-bound Washington Redskins. That was their name then. Yes. Washington Redskins team. We had 1 win. So while I will be very unhappy, okay, and if I owned the team, I wouldn't fire McCarthy if he lost Sunday. I'd probably throw him on the airplane over Kentucky on the way home, okay? But if it wouldn't shock me, because I know the history of this rivalry.
Well, look, if it ended today, we've got San Francisco, obviously, with the bye.
Yes.
In the NFC. And the matchups are Detroit and the Rams, Green Bay and Dallas.
Right.
Tampa Bay and Philadelphia. If you're Philadelphia, this is what you want. This is what you want. If you can't win the division, this is kind of what you want. You want to play Tampa. You want to get Tampa at home. That's a game I feel you can win. I've not seen any points.
No, I can see Philly winning. I can see Philly beating Tampa, but I will say this. last week notwithstanding, because Tampa played horrible last week. They were down 20-0 going into the fourth quarter. But generally speaking, over the last 8 weeks, Tampa's played good football. I mean, the records don't match when you look at the two teams, but if you look at the last 8 weeks, Tampa's played probably a better quality of football week in, week out. Do I think Philly can beat Tampa? Sure. And
I would rather, if I'm Philadelphia, go to Tampa than have to go to, let's say, what were the other choices here? Go to Dallas?
Well, here's what I would really
Go to
like.
Detroit?
If I had to play it out, besides my team winning their first game, which you can never count in the NFL, but let's say they did, I would be rooting like hell for the Rams, because I'd love for Philadelphia to come to Dallas because we know them. And I'll be honest, I think I watched that first game 5 times, different parts of it. I'm still not sure how we lost them the first time. We dominated 3 of the 4 quarters. They got 1 quarter, the third quarter of the first game, and that's it. Dallas.
Well, they were still believing then. They weren't so shaky, confident-wise at the time. Now, this part might sound crazy. If you're Philadelphia and you beat Tampa Bay and other things work out the way they are supposed to work out.
And you go to San Fran.
And that's a team that you faced already this year. You kind of know how they're going to attack you. Yes, they blew you out by a mile, which probably started the real skid for them. But it is a rematch, which is something you'd feel better about. I think Philadelphia feels better about a rematch against San Francisco than going against Dallas for.
I'm going to tell you, and you and I talked about this, I think it was last year or the year before, because it came up in the playoffs. If you go research that 3 times thing, even the third time is, I think it's 50% or better. The team sweeps all 3 games in the NFL now.
Well, we wouldn't have that scenario with Dallas and Philadelphia.
No, we wouldn't. I'm saying in general, I think in the NFL, I'm not so sure how much a rematch is going to help Philly with San Francisco, because I think Philadelphia, if you ask me, I think you started asking, are they toast? I think they can win the first game. What I see with Philly this year, besides the defense being very suspect on the back end, I think Jalen Hurts, and next year is going to be interesting, or the playoffs. Maybe he can dispel everything.
Oh, I sense a David Carr moment coming on.
No. I think they can, if he wins 3 games in the playoffs, then, he doesn't have to do this. But I think with Hurts, last year, the way they ran their offense kind of took the NFL by surprise.
Figured out. People have figured them out.
Yeah, what he did wasn't the same thing, but I keep giving you the analogy to RG3 that year. RG3 came out. Nobody knew how to defense it. They won the NFC East. He got hurt in the playoffs, unfortunately, and he was never the same again. And away he went. We go, I don't know if I'm saying that he's there, but the first 2 years in the league, he wasn't really impressive. Last year, he was almost MVP quality, right?
Right.
And then this year, he's a turnover machine.
It's funny how things can change for you in this league, whether you're a team player, etc. It's just funny how that could happen. With all that said, Emil, Philadelphia is what they are right now. And I think where they are in the playoffs, in my opinion, is kind of the best case scenario for them. They may not succeed. They probably won't. Based on what we've seen, it's probably the best scenario for them.
If you mean the best scenario, the best scenario for them would have been to beat the Cardinals and Giants and be home as the number 2 seed.
Yeah. Playing Green Bay, you say something like
playing anybody in Philadelphia, tough place to play. But that aside, I agree with you. If you're not winning your division, I think them and the Browns would end up in nice positions, because the Browns are going to play the Jags or the Colts or the Texans on the road. And I think that's if you're going to be on the road first game, that's a nice place to be. And I think same thing with Philly. If you're going to play a first round game, go on the road and play Tampa.
Yeah. And it's the same thing for Cleveland. You win your first game, you're playing someone you played already, which, yeah, you may not win, but it does. I'm telling you, as someone who's played and coached, that's a better feeling than someone that's kind of awesome that you haven't faced
Oh
all
yeah, yeah,
season.
yeah. You know what to expect. Sure. I mean,
If you're going against Baltimore, you definitely know what to expect.
I mean, back to Philly. I think what would help them is they need to figure out. I think at some point they need to
They can
realize.
figure out a way to hold on to the ball a little
Well, they
longer.
need to be a run first team.
Right.
DeAndre Swift survived the whole season. Usually he was injured in Detroit. He's a good back when he's healthy. They have a good run blocking offensive line. I think that at some point they need to realize our best road to success this year is running the ball behind our offensive line and shortening the game, hoping we can control the ball.
Limit possessions.
Yes,
I
our
would do that.
defense
And you know
isn't.
what? He's big as hell. I'd find ways to, and since you can't get him the ball the way he needs to, otherwise, I'd find ways to get the ball in the running game to AJ Brown.
Like
Just get the
Debo
ball in his
Samuel.
hand.
What you're really saying is start using Brown more like
The way they use Debo.
like they use Debo
He's
because
a big guy.
and
Yeah.
he's one of your playmakers. Get him the ball. Get Smith the ball on some reverses. But stop pretending that you've got Dan Marino back there.
And there's going to be precision passing for 60 minutes. I got
Not
you.
happening.
We agree on that. And that's not even the game everywhere anymore. You know what I mean? So that's the deal. All right. Let's jump into our picks here. Talk about what went down in the NFL, and then we don't have picks for you in college. Well, we do have.
I did
our
a
national
summary
championship.
for us. I did a summary for us just so I can, for our fans out there, we keep
The
track
accountant in you could not help it.
Yes, but we
but
keep
I'm
track
glad
every
you
week.
I'm glad you did this.
It's all on tape. We don't, we tell you every week what we won, what we lost. You can go look. So we both went 5-5 on the Bulls. It wasn't a great bowl season for us.
It's tough. These bowl games are tough.
They are tough now. They're even tougher than they were. We used to kill the Bulls, and I always did well. It's very hard now, truly, to figure out. Not only you have to figure out motivation, guys that are going to be out, the impact it's going to have. It's very hard to handicap bowls. We both went 5-5. So, as they say in the gambling business, you lost some vig.
Yes.
Going into this championship game, which we're both going to handicap for you. I'm 29-23 in college football. Chad, your record's still outstanding, 35-17. So that's still 2 out of 3 there. NFL last week, I was 2-1 for everybody. I had winners on the Raiders and Giants, loser on the Bengals, which, by the way, was a very tough loss because at one point in that game, I think the Bengals were up 10, maybe, and they were getting 7, and we lost by a point. You had the Bengals and Seahawks as losers, winner on the Jags. So pro football, I'm 30 wins, 20 losses, a tie. You're 25 wins, 24 losses, 2 ties. So add it all up. I'm 59-43-1. You're 60-41 and 2 ties. So when you do that together, I just used the $500 better. If you bet $500, counting your vig that you're losing on every loss, you're up $13,300 just these 2 chumps.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Not
I
bad.
think that's absolutely amazing. And just something for you guys out there to really,
It's
really
something
Did you
to
blindly
chew on.
follow us this year, fans? Ask yourself that question. First, I just want to take this moment before we jump into the picks to give a shout out to our sponsor, Bovada Sportsbook, one of the leading and oldest, if I could use that term, sports books operating online. And by oldest, I mean quite experienced in the online sportsbook game. Great lines, great customer service, everything that you would want in a sports book. So if you're out there and you're looking for a place to play, and guys often are, check out Bovada Sportsbook. We have a link to it in the description here, both on the YouTube show and any way that you happen to be streaming this podcast right now. So check out Bovada.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's talk about the college game, and then at the end we'll pick it. Each of us can give our picks before we.
I thought we'd end with that. That makes sense.
You want to end with the college game?
I want to end with the college football. That's what everyone wants to talk about.
Okay, how about this? I'll lay out my NFL, you lay out your NFL, then we can talk a little bit about that college game and say who we're going to pick.
Sounds good.
I don't know who we're going to pick. We may pick opposite ends on that one. I'm going to start off in the NFL, though, on the Saturday games this week. There's 2 Saturday games, and one of them is a win or go home game, and that's the Colts Texans. Okay, folks, if whoever wins this game is in the playoffs, whoever loses is going home. And matter of fact, the winner of this game has a chance to win the AFC South if the Jaguars lose Sunday at Tennessee. So it's a big game. I don't think they did any favors here for a young Texans team. I'm impressed with the Texans this year. I like CJ Stroud, but they've made them a small road favorite in this spot. And the Colts have always traditionally been pretty good at home. It's more of a more veteran team than the Texans. And, that place is going to be rocking. They want to see some playoff football in Indy. They're catching 1.5 at home. The points don't matter. I just think they win this game. And this isn't really a pick against the Texans. I just don't like the position that they're in, being a road favorite. Again, in this type of game, there's some pressure. It's a playoff game, essentially. So I'm going to ride with the home team and take the Colts plus 1.5. Second game, another big one. I'm big game hunting here. It's the only way to go in week 18. Packers, once again, find themselves in a win and in situation as they were last year, and they failed miserably last year at home against the Lions, okay? A team that they owned for decades. And, the Bears, Aaron Rodgers was their daddy. But he isn't playing this week. And while Jordan Love's had a great season, the one thing Jordan Love can't do is play defensive tackle or defensive end. The Packers have a problem stopping the run. And the Bears are not the team you want to come to town if you can't stop the run, because that's what they do well. They're getting 145 yards rushing a game. Justin Fields, since coming back from injuries, playing good football. Quietly, the Bears have played really good football for the last 4 to 5 weeks. I know they're 6-9. That sounds funny, but they were miserable at the beginning of this year. They've gotten their act together. They're getting 3 points here. Unfortunately, I think they send the Packers home sad again this year. And this is the oldest rivalry in the NFL. And I think they'd love nothing more than to ruin the Packers season. Give me the Bears plus 3. Finally, the biggest game, Sunday Night Football. You have a very odd situation here. The Bills win this game, they're the number 2 seed. If they lose this game and the Steelers win on Saturday, which is very possible, the Ravens are resting Lamar, and the Jaguars were to win on Sunday, very possible, they're playing the Titans. The Bills could literally be home watching the playoffs. They're desperate. This is more of a pick that the Dolphins, I'm going to throw out last week's game. Those things happen in the NFL. It was a bad spot. The Ravens are playing good football. The Dolphins came off a Christmas Eve close victory over a really good Dallas team. They may have been a little full of themselves. Bradley Chubb's out for the year now. I'm going to throw out the game. This isn't a pick against the Dolphins. It's a pick. I'm going to take the desperate team. The Dolphins are in the playoffs regardless. Sure, they'd love to win the division. The Bills are playing for their lives potentially. And they're a talented team. I can't see them missing the playoffs. Give me the Bills minus 3.
All right, summarizing, Amo likes the Indianapolis Colts in a kind of a do-or-die situation on Saturday as 1.5-point underdogs at home to the Houston Texans. That line scared me away, but he likes Chicago in an upset situation, taking a piss, so to speak, all over the Green Bay and their chances to get into the NFL playoffs. Wouldn't that be a great thing? And then in another divisional situation, the Bills kind of possibly catapulting themselves into a bye by beating the Miami Dolphins as 3-point road favorite.
No bye. They'll be home. They'll be the number 2.
My bad.
Yes,
home.
Yes.
Yeah,
no bye, but
I'm tripping there. All right. So that's what we've got. Here's what I'm going with. Emil, I'm going to right off the top agree with you in the Chicago Green Bay game. Chicago, as you have said quietly, has played some really good football over the last month plus. They've won 4 of their last 5 games. That one loss was a 3-point loss at Cleveland, who's in the playoffs for the AFC and a serious football team. Their last 3 wins, Emil, have all been by double digits. Chicago is playing very strong football right now. And while the Packers have been pretty good themselves, not quite as good as the Bears. They've won 3 of their last 5 football games, but they found a way to lose to the Giants, and they got beat up at home by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Right now, Chicago is a more consistent football team who can go out there and play carefree. The Green Bay Packers are coming to this game with the little tight, so to speak. So I'm not feeling very good about Green Bay without Aaron Rodgers against Chicago. So I'm going to back the Bears in this particular game, and I think they're 3-point underdogs, correct?
Correct.
I like the Bears in that one. Carrying along, hey, why don't we have a really good story, end a good way for the Las Vegas Raiders? They love their coach. They are going to go all out to try and make sure he gets the job. Denver's out of the playoffs. They are a little bit of a mess right now between Sean Payton and what happened with Russell Wilson and asking him to change up his contract or we're going to bench you. There's just a lot of BS going on there. And without the carrot of the playoffs hanging over their head, I just don't know what Denver's mindset is going to be going into Las Vegas. I already know Las Vegas Raiders are going to go balls to the wall for Antonio Pearson trying to get him that job. So I think they're going to be super highly motivated versus a team who's going to be, let's say, not so much. Asking them to cover 2.5 in this just doesn't seem like a really, overly big thing to have the Las Vegas Raiders do. So give me the Raiders there as a less than a field goal favorite in this game. And then Emil, well, I played around with a lot of Dallas Cowboys football games this year. Dallas away from home is Clark Kent. They're Superman at home. They're Clark Kent with the glasses and the whole really goofy thing saying silly stuff to Lois Lane. That's who they are away from home. I don't know how much Dallas really cares about this game, Emil. You could fill me in on that. But even if it meant the world to them, having them...
Well, they have to win or they don't win the division. They win the division with the win.
Even with that case, I think odds makers have decided to use that fact to throw extra cheese on this pizza. And for Washington, in what has been a miserable season where you're possibly going to lose your head coach, there's no better way to walk out of this season feeling good than to mess with your arch rivals' playoff positioning, chances, whatever, send them off as losers here into the season, into the playoffs. This would be the Super Bowl for Washington. And though I think Washington will find a way to be Washington at the end of this game, I think as strongly as they're going to go at Dallas throughout this game is going to keep them within this number. And maybe the Cowboys pull it off, but I don't think they do it by more than 7 to 8 points here. I like Washington as a deep underdog at home in this game against their arch rival in what has been a miserable season. I believe our number is 13, correct?
I almost made that one of my picks, to be honest with you. I think it's way too much for a home underdog. But let me recap your picks. You've got the Chicago Bears +3. We agree there. You've got the Las Vegas Raiders -2.5 and the Washington Commanders +13.5.
13.5, I get a hook. How nice.
Yeah, you get a hook. Now, the line for the championship game before we start discussing it is 4 points. 4.5 points, excuse me.
Yeah.
Which I have to tell you, I'm a little bit surprised.
That's meaningful.
By that. Pardon?
That's meaningful, that hook.
Yeah, and I'm a little surprised by it. I figured this line to be 3. When I was looking at this game when it first came out, I was figuring that this would be a solid field goal game.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you thinking?
I am thinking I'm gonna rock with Michigan.
Oh, you went right to it. You weren't even gonna tease.
No, I'm not gonna tease. I'm gonna rock with Michigan, and the reason why is that I know what I'm gonna get every week with them. If there's been a consistent football team all year long, it has been Michigan.
Yeah.
If you look at the other teams that are involved in the college football playoffs and teams that could have possibly been involved in the college football playoff, there were always those moments where you got unsure, even with Washington, even to the point where folks didn't even think Washington would get this far because they were pretty sure Oregon was going to take it to them. In the championship game for the Pac-12.
I mean, talking about Washington, now that you bring them up, and again, they're here. They deserve to be here. They're 14-0, so there's only 2 undefeated teams in the country. But specifically with handicapping this game, there's another team that they're 8-0 in one-score games. 8-0. There's going to be, I think I like Michigan as well. So
I think within the season that builds toughness, though.
Yeah, it does, but there's tends to be a day where the ball doesn't bounce your way, and they haven't had that yet necessarily. Mm-hmm. I like Michigan like you do. I think this game is one thing I see with Washington. Texas isn't nearly as good defensively as Michigan, but as that game wore on in the crunch time, Texas started figuring out ways to get stops to hold Washington to field goals, which allowed them to get back into the game to the point that they were taking shots into the Washington end zone to win that ball game. I think Michigan will figure it out much quicker. I think Washington will have some early success. Michigan's got a very stout defense, probably at this point the best in college football, right? We agree them. And I think they'll figure it out real quick what Washington does, and they'll slow them down. Do I think they're going to hold them to 10 points? No. But I don't think Washington's going to stop Michigan that easily either.
No, the only thing that gives me a little bit fear here is just what Washington can do offensively. But Michigan has been so strong on defense all year long. I'm with you. I think they'll figure things out on that side of the ball and how to handle that Washington attack a whole lot sooner. I'm a little concerned about all of the Michael Penix Jr. mania that's going on right now. That tends to not bode well for a particular team in a game like this. It ends up being more pressure, not only on that player, but on the entire unit right there. One thing that Penix has struggled with in his career, as a lot of quarterbacks do, but some, less than others, is when there's pressure. And I think Michigan can get pressure on Penix the way that other teams have not been able to this year. And it's going to be interesting to see how he performs in that situation. People right now are ready to put him at number 2 and to even suggest that he's a better prospect than Caleb Williams. And he may indeed be that. It's just that's going to be a lot of pressure on this guy right here. And I'm going to just hang on to the fact that Michigan has been a consistent team all year. They seem like a team of destiny, and they have bonded. I really realized that last week. They have come together. I just don't think they'll be denied here. 4.5 does open a back door, but I'm gonna say Michigan wins this by 10 or 11.
This has a feeling for me, and I was going to give you a score. It's funny you say 10 or 11. The score it's sticking in my mind, don't ask me why, is like 34-24.
I've got 28-17 in my
Okay, mind. Yeah. I mean, I'm feeling something like that. The thing I think Harbaugh will do this game that I think he'll be able to execute more so against the Washington than, say, an Alabama who has, a stout defensive front, and he still was able to run the ball when he needed to. I think he'll really go to that pound, the ground and pound, pound and ground type.
Oh, he's definitely going to find out if Washington wants to play football.
Yes, and I think that has a very psychological. If it's a successful, doesn't just have an impact on the Washington defense. It's going to have an impact on the offense because they got to sit there on their helmets watching a 10 or 8 minute drive, a 7-minute drive, boom, boom, boom,
Yeah, and it could lead to you pressing when you finally get the ball.
Yes, when you get the ball, you press.
Yeah. Yes. So I think we both agree here. I don't remember who I think I had Michigan winning this at the beginning of the year. You could
let me pull it out for you because I saved these things. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, who do we have in this championship? I know I didn't have Washington.
In the championship game, we both had Michigan playing Georgia. You had Georgia winning.
We'll see there.
I had Michigan winning.
Against? Oh, we both said Georgia. Michigan versus Georgia.
We both had Michigan, Georgia.
Well, hell, if I can't get Georgia, I'm going to go to my next best thing. There we go. Michigan. Against
Michigan, there you go.
Yeah,
we didn't. We had them in the final. I mean, I think we both looked at this was the year for Michigan. Like, I felt like if they're not going to get there this year, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah. So, all right, that's a wrap on this college football season. We're going to find out Monday if we end this whole college thing on a high note. Any way you look at it, though, we're both winners in terms of picking games in college football this year. That one game, college football playoff game, can't undo any of that. So if you're a guy that blindly followed these two chumps all season long, don't do anything stupid in that last game. It's just one game. Don't go crazy. If you were a $500 bettor, don't go betting 1,000.
And don't handicap the handicappers. You have to learn that.
You got to keep it clean each and every time. So just roll with that, and we can all celebrate, win or lose after that last game. But both Emil and I agree on Michigan. And then you have the picks from us in the NFL. There is one game where we both agree, and that is on the Chicago Bears. Who would have thought that? You and I coming together on the final game of the year to back the 7-9 Chicago Bears, who
listen, the Bears played some really solid football, and it's going to be our offseason shows will be interesting because I think they're going to be the linchpin of the NFL draft. They're sitting there with that pick from Carolina, and everybody wants to know, are they going to take a quarterback and trade Justin Fields? What are they going to do?
It did cross my mind that maybe at some point in there, they would start thinking about draft positioning as they're playing the Green Bay Packers. But no, we've got a coach who was on the hot seat and still may kind of
Well, they
be.
have the first pick sold up because they've got Carolina's pick.
Oh, that's right. Thank
It
you,
doesn't
Carolina.
matter.
So there you go. That makes me feel even better about the
Yes.
Chicago pick. So that's it for us. I'm glad we've got my man Emil because he's on top of playoff scenarios and draft picks and all those good things. So that's why we got my man Emil here on the show. So listen, I appreciate all of you guys taking your time out to both watch and listen to the show on your way out. If you haven't done this already, subscribe to the YouTube channel, as well as if you're listening to us on one of your streaming devices, Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcast, wherever you're listening to us, go ahead and hit the subscribe button there so that you don't miss out on the next great show like this one that we're putting out. That's going to be it for us. We'll see you guys after Championship Monday as we head into the playoffs next week. For Emil Calamina, I'm Chad Wilson. Thanks for listening to and watching the Two Chumps Football Podcast. See you guys next week.